Okay. So in yesterday's session, we have discussed up to multimedia tags. So only pending now you want me to deal with the SVG. So if you want to go with the SVG, the basic thing how we can deal with SVG is, so where is it? So for example, it is here. So let me take SVG will be starting with the tag called SVG itself. Okay. So parent tag already you know. So in the next, we need to mention what is the height and the width that you need to mention to that particular SVG. Okay. So let me give width is equal to, I'll just give 200. Just imagine that means 200 px. So whenever you are giving width attribute, not property, width attribute, if you're giving, so at the time, if you just give a value, it will act as a px value. So if you put percentage, it will act as a percentage. Okay, percentage means whole screen is 100%. You can give based on that, but px means 1 px or 2 px, 100 px, 200 px, like that, it will be available. Okay. So next, so height also, let me give as 200. So now within this that I'm gonna give my SVG. So how I can give? For example, I need a circle of a SVG. Okay. So I'll directly take circle. There are predefined some of the tags that we can use for SVGs. Okay, you try to check them. So circle X. So X direction, let me give. CX is one of the attribute. Okay. CX is equal to, let me give 100. Okay. Circle X means X direction, you know, right? X and Y directions. So circle Y direction. I want it to be also 100 px. If I want a circle, it should be equal width, like a square. So 100. So next I need to go with the, what for the circle, I need to give some line or something border I need to give. That's where I'll give stroke, I'll give. So stroke I'll give as color, I need to give orange. So next stroke I have given stroke width. That means stroke I given color, but simply to say border color I given. But I also need to give the border width. How much width? Like it is 1 px, 2 px, 3 px. Based on the width, the circle will be visible more, right? So now what I need to do? I need to give the width. Stroke width I'll give as 5 px. Just imagine. Okay, 5. So now I need to tell the what is the inner space that I want to create. So now I created a circle. Okay. So let me close it. And let us check in the browser. Okay, but something is happened to it. సేవ్ చేసా కాబట్టి ఇక్కడ నీకు ఇష్యూ ఇంత స్పేస్ వచ్చింది. ఇక్కడ ట్యాగ్ లోడ్ అవుతుంది కదా, కనిపిస్తుంది ట్యాగ్ ఇక్కడ. నాకు కనిపించట్లేదా స్క్రీన్ అట్లే ఉందా? కనిపిస్తుందా మీకు స్క్రీన్ క్లియర్ గా? Is it visible now? Now? Yeah. So ఇక్కడ వచ్చింది SVG. Our SVG we got here. You can see. But it's not getting reflected. Let us check this. It's not working. Oh, let me get some other SVG code. What is the mistake we did? Where? బట్ నువ్వు రేడియస్ ఈక్వల్ కూడా నీకు స్క్వేర్ అయినా రావాలి కదా, బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ రావాలి లేదా ఇది స్ట్రోక్ రావాలి కదా. రేడియస్ అనే మనం దాన్ని ఎంత రేడియస్ తీసుకుంటున్నాం అనే దానికి మాత్రమే. బట్ ఇది రావట్లేదు కదా. సో లెట్ మీ ట్రై విత్ రేడియస్. Radius. Yeah. Circle we are taking, right? Okay. So if you see here, so what all are the properties we are taking? So first of all, I just mentioned what is the width and height that I want to mention to my SVG basically. So if you're taking a square, if you're taking a rectangle, whatever it may be. So what is the proper width that you want to give and what is the height you wanted to give? Then what you're mentioning, then you have to take the based on it's a circle or rectangle, what you are taking. Okay, there will some of the topics or in-depth tags that you'll get for particular SVGs, circle, rectangle, rhombus, these and all. Okay. So then what you're telling, so Cx is nothing but circle X, circle Y. That means X direction from horizontal, vertical X direction will be horizontal or vertical. Sorry, vertical or horizontal. Horizontal will be X, vertical will be Y. Positive Y, negative Y. Both Y's will come in the this one. So I'm just mentioning what is the circle that I want to height and the width. So next radius. What is the radius that I want to give? So if I let me give radius as 10, if I give. Okay. So what happened now? If you see, the radius is getting, so whatever the radius is, that much my circle or the whatever the particular SVG that I'm trying, it is getting reflecting. Okay. So now next one I'm just mentioning stroke, nothing but what is the proper color, outer color that I wanted to give. Okay. So what is the color that I wanted to give? Here I given as orange, right? So that's what I got the stroke. Then I mentioned what is the stroke width. If I give 50, now if you see, how I'll get it? See how I got my stroke. Got it. So this is how my stroke will be helping me. Next, filling color. So if you want to fill the color, you can use this mid color. So if I remove it, so now if you see basic color will be that there is no filling color. So if you want to go with customized your filling colors, you can go with this. So basically SVG is not about only accessing from your, you don't do from your side. Sometimes SVGs will be pre-downloadable. Okay. So pre-downloadable SVGs directly you can access them as a image tag. Okay. Like however we have .jpg, there are many extensions .jpg, .webp, .png, .jpg 2000 like that. There are many .svg also there. So this all can be, if it is a direct SVG, you can directly access from the image tag or figure tag. So if it is a, like you want to create an SVG by yourself, then you need to go with these functional methods like however you circle, maybe rectangle, rhombus, these methods you need to create by yourself. Got it? So that's how an SVG will be working. Got it clear? So next topic we'll be going with which one? Forms. Okay. So basically, what is the purpose of forms and why we use the forms? Hmm? Data entry. So what is the purpose of entering the data? Hmm? So okay, so whatever the data I am filling, every data will be stored in the SQL only. So basically, it's not about store database or anything. So the main purpose of forms is whether it is offline form like a written writing form or whether it is a digital form. The main purpose is to collect the data from the user, right? So whether it may be a marriage detail form, whether it may be a registration form, whether it may be a birth certificate form, whatever the form it may be. So the main purpose is to collect the data from the particular user. Okay. So what is the purpose of collecting the data? So that there will be many uses, but the main agenda of the forms is to collect the data, whatever the form it may be. So the main purpose that serves by the form is to collect the data from a particular user. So whether it may be any data, it may be then. So what is then what is after collecting what we will do? So whether I may be storing or I will be using in any other way. Got it? So it's not only about storing the data. Okay. So if you take an example, like you're sending registering a data for a Flipkart website, the data is storing. The same if you take for any websites where they'll give you data like please give your contacts, we'll get back to you. Like that forms will be there. In in that particular form, is the data is storing anywhere? It's not storing. It's directly just triggering to the mail and the mobile number as a message to the web page. For example, GRK only, if you take example, if you go to the GRK website and if you open it, immediately you will get a pop-up. Please, with the form details. Okay. It will ask like, fill the details, we'll get back to you. So as soon as you fill the details, so it's not going to be any databases. It is directly coming to us. So one of the copy will come to the mobile as a message, one copy will go to the mail, whichever willing. So like that, what happens? It may be some, for example, there in the Flipkart, I'm storing the data in a database. Here, I'm not storing the data. I'm just using it, accessing it for a temporary purpose. Got it? So like that. So whatever the purpose may be, but the main purpose of the form is to collect the data. Got it? So to collect the data, usually in the normal way, what we'll do, we'll use the papers in that forms, right? So in the Word file, we'll create the forms and we'll take the print. So in the digital way, how we'll create the forms? By using HTML. So by using the concept of forms. Got it? So basically, any form, if you take, there will be two types of validations. Okay. So first one is the client-side validations. Client-side forms and server-side forms also will be available. What is meant by client-side forms? Or else what is meant by client-side code? I already mentioned in the starting class, I guess. Definitely I should have mentioned. Tell me what is meant by client-side code, basically. Hmm? Tell me client-side. So the code that we written in the front end part, that can be called as the client side. Okay. So like what is the client side? HTML is and JavaScript is the client side. So front end, whatever we do, that will be the client side, server side, the back end. Got it? So if you go with the forms, there will be two types of forms, dynamic forms and static forms. Static forms will be created in the client side, dynamic forms will be data will be created from the server side. Okay. So now if you want to go with the form tags, for example, for a HTML, what are the basic building blocks? Backbone of HTML. Tags and what are the, tell me clearly, what are the backbone of HTML? Tags and attributes are the building blocks of HTML, right? So in the same way, if you go with any input tag, sorry, forms, so the form will be completely depending on a tag called input. Okay. So if you just take, let me come to the forms topic. Which one is visible? ఏది అనిపిస్తుంది బాగా అన్నిట్లో? This one or this one? Hmm? Which one? This one. Is it visible? This one? Uh, this one? Okay. Mommy. Sorry. This will be better. Eyes are burning. Okay, so form tags we'll be discussing now. So if I just enter, so let us see. So form tag. So if you see, as I already told you, whatever the concept that we start in the HTML, so the concept will start with the tag will start with the concept name only, right? So now, as I told you, we are dealing with form, so it will be starting with the form tag. So whenever we are talking about the form tags, there are few attributes that we must have to remember about a form. Okay, so there are three attributes like action, method, and name. So these are the three attributes that we must and should have to know about whenever we are using any form. So because each one plays one important key role here. Okay. So whenever if you go with the action attribute, so what it will tell. For example, I have filled my registration form or login form or whatever form it may be. So finally I was submitting my form. Okay. So as soon as I'm submitting my form, so I have to send the data to somewhere else. Okay. So ఎక్కడికో వచ్చాడు పంపాలి కదా డేటాని. So it is like the destination. So there will be a destination where I send my data. So whether it may be a database or whether it may be some other functionality, anything it may be. So the action will tell that where you need to send that particular data. So that, for example, so if you are using an image, the source, what it will tell that from where I need to pick the data, right? Exactly. Image may be like a video, maybe anything it may be. Source attribute will tell that from where I need to take the particular image or attribute, right? Image or video, anything. So in the same way here, action will tell that. So where I need to send this particular data after properly submitting. Got it? That is what my action attribute will tell. So second one will be method. So usually in the method, there will be two attribute values. One will be the get, one will be the post. Generally, what is meant by post? Sending. Get means receiving, right? So in the same way here, so whenever your form is just sending the data, okay, like login, if you take example of login, username and password, you're just sending the data, you are not receiving any data from the backend. But if you take a registration form, country code will be, and like state will be, like country, and these and all will be drop downs will be there, right? So those all will be dynamic data, right? So that complete dynamic data can be handled by this. So as soon as I'm filling the form, like username, my name I filled, then I go on with the phone number. In the phone number before, I have a country code. So which will be a dynamic one. Dynamic in the sense I'm getting from backend. So country code I selected. Then I give my data here. I'm sending the data at the same time, receiving the data from the particular backend. So in this way, in these methods, you'll use the get method. So get method in a sense, it will have both post purpose and the get purpose. But post method, if you use, it will have only posting the data to the database. Got it? So these are the two types of methods that we have in a form. Okay. So if you go with any dynamic forms, not with the static forms. So next one will be name. So for example, every person, what is the purpose of giving a name? So what is the purpose of giving a name to you people? To find the particular, what is by using name only we can call you, we can remember you, or whatever I want to deal with you. The name is the medium there. So in the same way, for example, the name is like it is the complete heart to a form or anyone, right? So if you're storing, if I'm giving some input values, like it is a registration form I given, so there is no name for that particular form. Where I use store that data, right? So if you want to store that data in the database, I need to tell the database that from which form I'm getting data, or else from what is that particular form which is helping me. I should also know. So for that purpose only, name is very mandatory for any form. So whenever you use any form, name, whether you miss the action or method, name should be never missed, because name is the one which will tell what is the particular form is dealing about. So whether you want to add functionality, whether you want to remember, whether you want to deal with the backend integration, anything it may be. So the whole thing can be handled by this form name itself. Got it? So now if you see, so these are the three important attributes that we need to remember for any form. So I'll give here like contact form, contact underscore form. So this is what I given name to my form. Okay. So next, so however for HTML, tags and attributes are the building blocks, that means backbone. For form also, there is a backbone tag. So that is nothing but input tag. Okay. So input is the backbone of any form. So if there is no input, that means there is no form at all. Okay. So what is this input will do? So this input is nothing but where you will use the data, complete data you give. So if you go with any digital form, this is what you'll have, right? Yeah. Which batch? Hmm? Okay. So if you take any form, which one will be the parent here? So if you take any digital form like login or register, you'll have this type of input box only, right? So with some names like enter the email, enter the like username, like that, some placeholders will be there, or some titles will be there. So, but finally, where you will enter your data. So this is where you will enter your data, right? So this will be called as the inputs. Okay. So input tag we will create by using a tag called input here. So if you just imagine, so as soon as I created an input, it got created. So I just given here. So here for a form tag, action, method name are the important attributes. So like a backbone. So for the input tag, type is the backbone attribute. Okay. So that means here each one is independent depending on someone. Okay. Like the form is depending on the input. So the input is depending on the type. Got it? So this is what how it will be depending. So what is this type will tell is, so basically if you see, while you are giving a mobile number, so automatically the keyboard on in your mobile will be changed to the numeric. So no alphabets will be available, right? Why? Because it should take number, phone number means only take numbers. Is there any number which will have alphabets? No, right? So in the same way, if you take any password, it should accept all. If we just allow you to give numbers, is it fine? No, right? So like that, the input type, even though we create an input type, we have to tell how it should behave, whether it have to take the text, whether it have to take the numbers, whether it have to take the symbols, what it have to take. That all thing can be done by ourselves. We need to mention what is that input should look like. Okay. So now if you see here, so in this input tag, I can give the alphabets, I can give the symbols, I can give the numbers. So that means it is accepting all the characters, right? So here, why it is accepting all the characters? Because so I give it type as text. So whenever you want any input tag to accept all the characters, whatever the character you give, whether it's a symbol or number or anything, if you want to make it accept everything, so then you have to give input type as a text. Got it? So that is the reason why as a given input type as text, so it is automatically accepting all the characters. Okay. So apart from type, there are few other attributes that we need to mention. So for example, if I just briefly give input like this, so what is this input for? How you will understand what is the data that I need to give her, whether it is for username or mail or password, how I should know, right? So I don't know what is the purpose of this input. So if I want to know the purpose, I should need to give some name or title something. So that is where the label came into the picture. So label will work as a label for, like it is for username, you just imagine. So username, I'll give a short form uname. So user name, sorry. So if you see now, I got a title. So by seeing this, I think you'll understand or not. Clearly, we can understand, okay, this is for username. So particularly, I need to enter username in this field. Got it? So this is one of the method. So for example, there is one more method. So I don't want any label, but I have another attribute that I can use it in the input. That is nothing but placeholder. So placeholder is equal to enter username. I given like this. Okay. So if I go back and reload here, see what I'm getting. So I'm getting within the input box, enter username. So once I started typing anything, it is visible. So the placeholder is completely getting hidden. So it is not visible. So once I close it again, there is no data in that input field. So basically how this placeholder will work is, whenever the input field is completely empty, the input field will show the placeholder. So if you put some data into that input field, the data, the placeholder will be hidden, right? Because that is how my placeholder will work. So now, is it clearly whether I can use the label or I can use this placeholder to show what is the purpose of the input form? Is it clear? అర్థమైందా? No doubts ఉన్నాయా? Okay. So now, so in the same way here, what is the purpose of giving name? So the main purpose of giving name is to tell what is the data is particularly showing about. So not only about the form, so within the form also I need to mention, suppose it is username, I need to tell, okay, it is a username details. So it is a password, I have to tell it is a password details. If I want to tell like that, I need to use the attribute called, what is the attribute? Name I need to use. So what is this particularly for? So what is this input for? Basically, username. So I'll short form I'll give like uname. Okay. So like this. So there are these are the three important attributes. First one is the type, that is mandatory attribute. We must and should have to give the type. Second one is the placeholder. It is our choice whether you want to give or not. Third one is the name. It is also mandatory attribute that you need to mention to any field. So why it is mandatory? Because, for example, so just imagine, so now I have a name here. Okay, if I go to the browser, let me reload it. So now I give a name like Manoj Kumar. So when I submit it, so what happened here? If you can see here, as I didn't mention any URL in the action because I'm not sending this data out of my page anywhere. So that's why it is showing in the URL whole data. So if you see uname is equal to whatever the data I given, is it showing or not? For example, if I remove this name here, and if I reload again and if I give the data, so now if you see, is there any data I'm showing here? Because we don't know what is the data particularly I'm dealing with. So it's just a form filling and submitting, right? So that is why name will always play a very key role in any input tags or form tag. Got it? So that is the purpose we give the name to collect the data in a proper way. So this is the first method of using input. For example, I have one more input. So password. So password is also one of the inputs. So I'll be right. Password. So I'll use the name, I'll use short name as PSD. Okay. So if I go to the browser, so now if you see, here I got two input fields, right? So one is for username and one is for the password. So if you see submit, these all are coming in a single line. Why? Why these all are coming in a single line? Hmm? Because you already know the difference between inline and inline block. Do you know or not? Inline block and block. So now tell me what is the display property of these elements now? Whether these are block level elements or inline elements. Hmm? Why it is a block level? So nobody remember what is meant by inline and inline, block and block. So blindly telling, right? Hmm? What inline elements will do? What inline elements will do? So what block level elements will do? So now tell me whether this input is a inline or a block level element. Just now we said block, right? Tell me it's a inline or block level. Correct answer. Which is correct? It is a inline or it is a block? Hmm? So here these are the by default inline elements. Why? Because if you see here, what happening here? So it is only taking how much space it is required. So is it taking more space? No, that is the reason why next input coming side, after that input coming side. So how many inputs you put? Those all will come side by side only because those are inline elements. Okay, not block level elements. So I don't want them in a single line. I want them down by down. I'll use a BR tag. Usually we are not supposed to use the BR tag. Just for explaining purpose I'm using. Don't use the BR tag in your code. If I see that, I'll delete the whole code. Okay. So second one is the password. Yeah. So now if you say I got a username and a password. So if you see username is accepting text type, everything it is accepting. So second one is the type of password. So if you see if the data is visible, no. But when I submit it, now you can see what is the data I given. These are the characters that I have given as a password. Got it? So why it is hiding? Because you already know always password will be sensitive. So that is the reason why the data is automatically getting what happening? Hiding or not? Okay. So like that. So as soon as you give the type there as input type password or any text, the type itself have already some predefined features like hiding the text, like predefined validations and all like that. Okay. So if you take one more example type, email, just consider next type as the email if you take. Okay. So for email, type of email. Okay. So now if I go to the browser and if I reload, so I got an email. So until now, if you see, until unless I didn't give any data, it is getting submitted without issues. But whenever I give some details here, like this, I given some details. Okay. And I just typed something and I submitted. What it is telling? Please include an at the rate in the email address. W3 is missing an at the rate. So usually what is the syntax of an email? So it should have a at the rate. After at the rate, there are minimum two characters are required. After that, dot is required. Minimum two characters or three characters. What? How many characters it may be? Gmail, Hotmail, like that. It is how many it may be. But two characters are minimum. So then dot should be required. So after the dot, minimum two characters are required, like .ac, .com, .in, like that. So this is the original format of any Gmail, right? So Gmail or Outlook mail, any mail it may be. Mail is this is the syntax. So here I just given some text, but it is missing the at the rate, right? So now when I click on submit, what it is telling, it is automatically popping a message like it is missing. So that means it is checking the data that I am giving. So that means it is validating. So these type of validations are called as HTML5 validations. Okay. So in the HTML5, the forms is introduced with the validations by based on the type. So password and text, there is no need of any validations. But email, there is a particular pattern that we need to maintain, right? So email should be like this only. Email and ilane undali. And okay, condition manukunnai, కొన్ని conditions. So it is failing that condition. So automatically it is showing a pop-up. That means it is validating. So if I give at the rate, so and if I try to submit, now what it is telling? Some of the please enter a part of at the rate after dot is missing and చెప్తోంది. So but if I use some text and if I submit, now it is submitting. So even though it is not completely doing the validation and starting to end whole validation it is not doing, but at least some validation, basic validation at the rate and some character validation is doing by this input type Gmail. Got it? So like this is the basic type of validation in HTML. These are called as HTML5 validations. Okay. Next, if you see, for example, so these all are like if I want to give validation, I need to give type. So this is the first type of validation. So second type of validation. So if I see here, if I submit automatically without data, also my form is getting submitted, but I'm not supposed to allow the user to submit the form without giving any data. So Facebook, if you just trying to log in, it will allow you to log in without data. No, right? You must should have to give some data, then only it will check whether it is right or wrong. It will check and it will let you to log in, or it will tell you to refill again, right? So to do that, that is where we'll get one of the attribute called required. So if you see now, if I click on submit, automatically my form is getting submitted, but I don't want to submit like this. If the user didn't given any data in that particular input type, I should not allow him to submit the form. So I'll give a attribute called required to the input field. So now if you see for this input field, I given attribute as required here, just required. Okay, that means I'm telling it is mandatory. So if I reload here, and if I just come here, now if I click on trying to submit, what it is telling? Please fill in this field. So it is making that field mandatory. Got it? So now if you see, again, if I'm trying to submit, it is telling you field, please fill this field. But if I just type something and if I submit now, so it is submitting because whatever the field I given required attribute, that is mandatory, not all the attributes, right? So even though the HTML5 validations, sometimes interviews will ask, is the HTML5 validations will work by default or when the data is given? అంటే ఏంటంటే సో డేటా ఇచ్చినప్పుడు వ్యాలిడేషన్ వర్క్ అవుతుందా లేకపోతే బై డిఫాల్ట్ సబ్మిట్ చేయడం వర్క్ అవుతుందా? So the validation will work only when we give data. For example, in a Gmail, input Gmail. So if you don't give any text or anything, if you submit, it will submit or not. But if you just give some text, then only it will check for the validation, whether it's a proper Gmail or not. Got it? So that is how my HTML5 validation will work. Until unless you didn't give any input to the particular input tag, there will be no validations. So once you give any data, then only the validations will happens. Got it? So now this is the second type of validation, like making it mandatory. So third type of validation is like using the minimum length and maximum length. For example, for a username, I want to put only minimum length of how much. Minimum is for minimum 4 characters I need to be there in that input field. Okay. So let me save it and if I reload. So if I input field minimum, now if you see, click on submit, please fill out this field and చెప్తాను. Now if I give 1 character, submitting something we made mistake. Okay. Now so if I reload it, now if you see, if I submit, it is asking for please fill out because due to required attribute. So when I give some data and if I submit, so what it is telling, please lengthen your text to 4 characters or more. You are currently using 1 character. So why it is telling? Because I given the condition like minimum you should take 4 characters or else don't take the characters. So now if you see, if I give 3 characters, if I submit, what it is telling? Same message, but it will tell you how many characters you have, 3 characters. Lengthen it to 4 or more characters. So if I give 1 more character, now if I submit, is it getting submitted or not? So for example, in the same way, I give the max length is equal to 8 if I give. So now if I go to the browser and if I reload, same thing. When I submit, it will not take submission. Okay. So if I give type, so see, after 8 characters, even if you want to type also, the input will not allow you to type. Why? Because I given maximum length as how much? 8 characters. Got it? So this is how my minimum length and max length validations will be working. So these are whatever the validations I did so far. These all are the HTML5 validations. Got it? So for example, I given like min length and max length. Okay. But if I remove here required. Okay. And if I reload here, so I didn't give any data. So if I submit, is the validation is working like minimum length and maximum length? No. Why? As I told you, until unless you didn't provide any data inside the input, so the HTML5 validations will not work apart from the required attribute. Got it? So if you see now, I put two characters, and if I try to submit now, what happening? So it is now checking for the validation because I given some data. దాంట్లో ఏదో డేటా ఇచ్చాను కాబట్టి చెక్ చేస్తాను. డేటా ఇకపోతే ఏమవుతుంది? చెక్ చేయదు. Validations will not work. Got it? So these are the sum of the HTML5 validations. So apart from this, there is the last method of validation is nothing but pattern, advanced method. So what is this advanced method pattern will do is, so basically pattern is a hide from like a from JavaScript. Regex pattern is the concept from where this patterns is introduced. So what is this patterns will do is, so whatever we are writing here, like I have some conditions like min length should be this much, max length should be this much, username should have only this many characters, and it should start with the capital letter. It should not contain any symbols or numbers. Like a few conditions I need to put to that. Okay. So in such cases, what I do, I'll use this patterns. So basically how these patterns will look is, for example, for the email, I need to put a pattern. I want to put a proper email I want to access. Okay. Like if you see here, even though it is checking for validation. So even though it is checking for validation, what it is till where? So if I give upgrade and if I give the address, it is taking, but it is not the proper email, right? So I want to give a validations where it should accept only proper email. So if I'll take one of the validations which I already applied. So for this website, I have kept some patterns. So I will take that patterns. So now if you see, so before, however, I given the attributes in the same way, now I have a attribute called pattern. Same as Midland and Madeline will have a pattern. So within this double quotes, I'll give my pattern. So if you see this, what is the pattern this is explaining? So it will be little clumsy to understand. But for username or password or wherever you want to use patterns, all the patterns will be available in the Google Chrome itself. If you search for particular pattern in for username or whatever the requirements you have, you can get them from Google. Okay, no need to worry about it. So what is my pattern? I written this pattern. How it will work is, so it should take a minimum of more than two characters, and after that more than two characters, it should have a at the rate symbol. That is mandatory. After at the rate, I need minimum two characters, and after the two characters, how many characters it may be. After that, I need a dot symbol. Got it? So after the dot, I need minimum two characters. This is the proper Gmail, right? If you take Manoj Kumar at the rate lenovo.com, here text is there, at the rate is there, middle text, dot, after the dot, text is there. Got it? So in the same way, now if you see, if I reload here, so now I given some text here. So now if you see, I given some text and it is taking at the rate is missing, same condition. Then after I given at the rate and I given some text, and now if wait, is it saved or not? Not saved. Okay. So when I'm trying to submit, it is telling at the rate is missing. So I given at the rate. So after at the rate, I given two characters. As per previous condition, type email condition, basic HTML, if I submit, should submit or not. But now what it is telling? It is telling, please enter the format requested. The format I requested as a pattern. So the pattern should have after the rate, it should have dot symbol. So if I submit, it will not take. If I give two characters, is submitting or not? So this is the proper syntax of a Gmail or not? Text at the rate text dot text. Got it? So this is how the patterns will work. So here I can, in the pattern, I can put the minimum length, I can put the maximum length, I can put the starting character, I can put the end character. So however the validations you want. If you learn the regex pattern, so the pattern you can write however you want. You don't need this minimum length, you don't need this maximum length and all. So directly you can write everything in a single pattern. So if you want to make your input field accept only alphabets, that to capital, you can write that also. If you want to accept only small, so you can write that also. If you want to accept only numbers, that also you can accept. So whenever if you see any like phone number giving OTPs and all, so this is the pattern regex they'll use. Okay. So here, these all are called as the client-side validations. Okay. So now tell me whether the client-side validations will be more secure or server-side validations will be secure. Why server-side will be secure? Why client-side will be not secure? For example, just imagine here. Now this is what my form. So if I want to submit, it will not allow. Where is it? Oh, require tag I removed, right? So it will not allow me to submit the data now, right? Because I kept required. But I am very clever. What I'll do, I'll directly come to the code because my code will complete front-end code will be visible in the browser. So I'll directly come to the code and what I'll do. Where is it? Where is the form? So in this form, now I'm very clever. What I'll do, I will come here directly and I'll remove this required. Now what happened? There is no required. Now if I submitting or not. So that means because whether it's a JavaScript code, whether it is a HTML code or CSS code, these all can be client-side code will be always visible in the browser and it can be accessible very easily by anyone. So whatever the client-side code is in the Flipkart or Amazon, even the HDFC Bank code also, you can directly get it. But that is the reason the code which is coming from the back end. So it will be always dynamic. That means the data is in the dynamic. Even if you change here, it will not change in the back end, right? So that is why always the client side will be very less secure because it can be compromised very easily. But coming to the which one server side, it can't be compromised that much easily. So that is the reason why the client side code will be less secure and server side code will be very, very secure. Got it? Is anybody have any doubts? Clear? Now you understood why client side code is less secure and server side code is more secure. Got it. Just give me a minute. So is it clear? ఇక్కడ clear ఉందా ఏమైనా డౌట్స్ ఉన్నాయా? Sure. So this is how you can create any form. So like this only ikkada ela aithe however you give an input type as text and all. So in the same way you will get type of radio buttons, type of check boxes, type of date, type of color picker, type of date picker, like that many are there. Okay. So what is your today's task is there are totally more than 21 plus of input types. Okay. So I want you to create a form with each and every input field. Okay. You should have a text input type. Input one, you should have a input type of password. You should have an email input type. You should have a radio type. You should have a checkbox. You should have a color picker, date picker, time picker, everything. So whatever the inputs, don't check in single website. No website will have all the input types. Okay. You try to check different websites, but I want each and every input tag. Got it? I'll ask tomorrow. Even if I didn't check, I'll ask you directly. I want you to tell 21. There are more than 21 plus input types. Okay. So try to check all the input types. If you have any doubts, I'll just explain it again tomorrow. Got it? So is it clear? సో ఇప్పటి వరకు జరిగింది ఏమైనా డౌట్స్ ఉన్నాయా? కొత్త వాళ్ళు పాత వాళ్ళు అందరినీ అడుగుతున్నాం. షూర్. ఫార్మ్ స్టాక్ టాపిక్ క్లియర్ ఉందా? సో ఈవెన్ ఇఫ్ యూ సీ హియర్ ఇన్పుట్ టైప్ సబ్మిట్ అంటే బటన్ ఉంది, ఇన్పుట్ టైప్ బటన్ ఉంది, ఇన్పుట్ టైప్ రీసెట్ ఉంది. రీసెట్ ఏం చేస్తుంది జనరల్ గా? ఫామ్ లో డేటా ఇచ్చి రీసెట్ క్లిక్ చేయగానే ఫామ్ అంతా ఎంటీ అయిపోతుంది. అవునా? ఇట్ విల్ క్లియర్ ద ఫామ్ బేసికలీ. So like that, there are many input types. Okay, try to check all the input types. Clear? Okay, so that's what about today's session. Anybody have any doubts? Feel free to ask now. No issues.